Welcome, everybody. I'm very happy to see all of you here. Also, you too. Also, those online, so welcome. Just a few notes. Maybe some of you don't know what RYI is doing. So we're a university with BA, MA, and PhD degrees, and we specialize in languages, philology, and philosophy. So those are the kind of major areas we work in. So the public lectures, and I'm very happy that Bibek has accepted to be part of our public lectures. So the public lectures are a way for us to display some of the work that goes on here, but also create space for visiting professors, because a friend of mine is saying that the stupa is a little bit like the navel of the world, especially the Buddhist world. So almost all scholars at some point in the Buddhist studies come by here, and we try to catch them and create a space where we can have discussions with them and benefit from their research. We're also using the public lectures as a way to branch out also from the kind of studies that are going in. So there's this semester some Buddhist art artists who are coming to the public lectures. And so kind of branching out to different areas of studies. And tonight we have, and I need my glasses, I'm sorry. Welcome, you're arriving just on time. So I'm quite fond of Bibek's work. We've been talking at different times over methodology together, but he completed his PhD thesis at Mahidol University in Thailand, translating 2 Sanskrit Abhidharma texts. He reads Buddhist Chinese, Sanskrit, and Pali. So we're very happy to have him as a faculty here. His area of research and interest includes Sarvāstivāda Abhidharma literature, Chinese Āgamas or Mahāyāna texts, also Madhyamaka philosophy, Buddhism and science, as well as non-Buddhist Indian philosophy. So quite a large area of interest. As a Buddhist practitioner, he believes that integrating modern energy therapy, such as the EFT, the emotional freedom techniques, with traditional Buddhist practices can help harmonize the mind by removing blockages and neurotic patterns. So please welcome with me, Bibek Sharma.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and welcome to all of you, those who are also online. There are at least 9 people. Great. So the topic today is, can an Arhat be a Buddha? And I think it's at least for me, this is an interesting topic. Yeah. And it was interesting because I was working on it while I was doing my MA in Taiwan. Then also I encountered another text for my PhD where some of the elements were there, actually. Yeah. The difference between the Buddha and Arhat. So I personally would like to chant before I start. So it's for myself. If you want to join, you can join. Buddham cha dharmam cha ganottamam cha yavadibodhim saranam gatoshmi danadipunnaischa kritairmayevir buddho bhaveyam jagato hitaya. So it has the usual refuse. The first 2 parts are refuse and second 2 padas are bodhicitta, written by Atisha Dipankara. Now, since the topic is, of course, interesting, I hope, but it is too big, like whether an Arhat can really become a Buddha, that would be too big a topic, because, and it's also controversial, because there are several texts and several interpretive systems, and I would like to delimit the scope. Yeah, otherwise that would not be a proper presentation. Oh, sorry for that one. Sorry for that one. Yeah, so I would be concentrating on the correspondence between Lúshān Huìyuǎn, a native Chinese monk, and Kumārajīva, Tumolosha. They exchanged. Well, before I go there, there's a concept of a distant mirror. I lost my thoughts. The concept is that since Buddhist text, could this text serve as a distant mirror to look at the Indian Buddhist traditions and the philosophical development? Especially, we know that texts were translated into Chinese from the 1st and 2nd century onwards. So it's quite early, right? And then since we lost many things in India, especially when Nalanda and Vikramasila were burned, so maybe it can serve as a distant mirror. This kind of Chinese text can serve as a distant mirror for us, reflecting the early Indian Mahāyāna. I don't like the word early, this kind of chronological scheme, but nevertheless. But I will not dwell on it. I'm just throwing an idea. Content-wise, my presentation will have 4 parts, and I hope I will be able to cover it within the time frame. The first will be queries by Lúshān Huìyuǎn in the Kumārajīva's exposition. This particular text, the correspondence between Lúshān Huìyuǎn and Tumolosha, the Kumārajīva, right? And then its historical context, because there was a special historical context because of which they started to, exchange letters. And then Kumārajīva explains as an authoritative person, let's say an Indian authoritative person, so-called, and then possible sources of Kumārajīva's thoughts, because his thoughts are a bit scattered, not very clear. And I had to reconstruct his thoughts, why he was saying what he was saying. So let's start with the first part, queries by Lúshān Huìyuǎn. So the name of the text I'm looking at right now is Tumolosha Fasha Ta'i. In English, we can translate like Ta'i, the great exposition. Fasha is normally great master, or and then great exposition of meaning. Also called, this text has another title called Ta Sheng Ta'i Chang, but this one is earlier, I think, and then now the one we have is Tumolosha Fasha Ta'i, the great exposition by Master Kumārajīva or something, or great meaning. Ta'i could be the great meaning too. So it is in the form of Q&A, as I have already explained. Like Lúshān Huìyuǎn had some confusions about certain philosophical aspects, and then when he heard that this authoritative person, Kumārajīva, has arrived in the Chinese soil, then he starts to write, right? And then Kumārajīva replies to his queries. It lasted more or less around 10 years between this correspondence between them. It's a long period of time, and we can understand because they probably didn't have email and WhatsApp, which is bothering me today, right now, here. I'm sorry. And then we are not really certain about the original structure because it was restructured. Of course, Chinese texts and like many other texts in India, where there were some editorial decisions and then they were restructured. So right now, in the structure we have, in the form we have, it has 18 sets of question and answer on different topic. Yeah. And they range. These topics range from Dharmakaya to Arhats receiving the prediction. That is Vyakarana. That means it's a common idea in Mahāyāna that if you are practicing the Mahāyāna path, and then you have generated bodhicitta, you are purifying bodhicitta at one point, you encounter Buddha or Buddhas, and they will give you predictions. And that assures your path to Buddhahood, or at least that it assures your sincerity or whatever. So this question about the Arhat becoming the Buddha is in the chapter 10th of this text, Chumuloshu Fashatai. Now, what was the question? What was he asking? It is about Arhats receiving the prediction of Buddhahood in the Lotus Sutra. And I hope you have some rudimentary idea about Lotus Sutra, or even you have read it. So this is the question. Yeah. Yuan where Yue. So Jingshuo here, Jingshuo is actually the reference of Lotus Sutra. Yeah? It is about the Arhats, Lúshān, receiving the prediction, receiving Vyakarana in Sanskrit, prediction or some kind of, it's like saying, you will become Buddha at one point. Yeah? This is the, I have a translation, rough translation. So, Huìyuǎn was asking, the Lotus Sutra mentions an assurance prediction of an Arhat for Buddhahood, and additionally says that at the moment of Nirvana, a Buddha stands before him or her and proclaims to him or her the essential Dharma. This essential Dharma is about the special Dharma of Lotus Sutra, or at least the path towards Buddhahood. If a stream like this, the teaching, it's a bit poetic here, this text is really polished, and then they have used the literary Chinese, comes out from the sacred canon. How can we not believe it? However, there are many locus positions, points not yet understood. Hence, I wish to cause Kumārajīva to explain those obstructed points. Now, as you know, the implication of the inquiry is that Buddha rolled the wheel of Dharma 3 times in his lifetime. Yeah? First in Risipatana, second in Gridrakuta, Vulture Peak, and third in Vaishali. Now he contradicts each time he rolls a new wheel of Dharma. And then, especially the teaching of the Lotus Sutra goes against the grain of certain teachings of the Buddha, which ideal previously was the Bodhi of Sravaka and Pratyeka Buddha. In the first turning of the wheel, at least as far as we know from the Mahāyāna point of view, the Buddha said, okay, if you do certain practices, if you include 37 practices of a Bodhi, then you will eventually attain Nirvana, and that is the end. That is the end of your path. That is the end of the samsara. And for that, you need to remove the afflictions. But he overturned that when he was teaching the Lotus Sutra in his 70s, yeah? as far as I know. So, reversing these earlier positions of 3 distinct vehicular systems, the Lotus Sutra advocates one vehicle. The Buddha says in Lotus Sutra, well, whatever I taught, that was a upaya, a skill in means, yeah? Forget about that. You will all become Buddha eventually. This is what he says. And now the assembly is shocked, and we know from Lotus Sutra that 500 Arhats, they boycott Buddha's assembly right away. Yeah? They walk away. We know that from the text itself. And so the implication of his other implications are that in order to draw clarification from Kumārajīva on the stronger form of Bodhisattva universalism, Huìyuǎn introduces three objections. Now, what is this, the stronger form of Bodhisattva universalism versus weaker form of Bodhisattva universalism? Yeah? And then Huìyuǎn has three objections regarding this stronger form of Bodhisattva universalism, which more or less I can quote the person who coined these terms, Jannatya, who was also one of my former mentor. So, C means the idea that the Bodhisattva path is appropriate for all, and that all Buddhists either are or should be on that path. So it exists in two forms. So that was the definition of Bodhisattva universalism. There are two forms. Weaker one, which says that, well, you can become an Arhat, but that is not an ideal path. Yeah? There is still another. If you fall for that one, then okay, what can we do? Yeah? But nevertheless, Bodhisattva path is the best. The stronger form that is actually advocated by Lotus Sutra, and which concerns even Arhats being predicted to be the Buddha, says that no, all of you, whether or not you had embarked in the path of Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha or whatever, you will become Buddha universally. That is so here there is a class dissonance between the weaker form and the stronger form of Bodhisattva universalism. And Huìyuǎn had hard time understanding it, and we will come to the historical context later on why he had problem. Because right now, being coming from the background of Tibetan Buddhism, I hope we have some ideas, but the context in China was different. Yeah? And let me just discuss. Am I taking too much time? I think I'm taking too much time. So 3 points of doubts by Huìyuǎn, yeah, especially regarding this. Point number 1 and 2. There are many points that I doubt about the proposition of Lotus Sutra, but I have summarized these 3 seriatim. The first one is an Arhat has no great loving kindness and compassion. So that is considered as the prerequisite for attaining Buddhahood. But since an Arhat does not have it, how can Lotus Sutra claim such thing? Second, an Arhat does not have skill in means and wisdom. Very important components, two wings of the Bodhisattva path. Yeah? Especially Upaya Kaushalya, because it is said that due to the lack of skill in means, they fall for the emptiness of one-sided kind of emptiness of nirvana. Actually, Kumārajīva also says that. And the logic behind the argument number 2 is that Arhats are not able to fly far away, that is Buddhahood, and often fall into emptiness. Yeah? So that is also said in the Tibetan system. That is kind of a Mahāyāna claim, general Mahāyāna claim. And that's the weaker form of Bodhisattva universalism actually. And the third, at the point of nirvana, and the third doubt here is they obtain absorption of emptiness, shunyata samadhi. This is my rendering actually, but we don't know what whether they were trying to say shunyata samadhi or something else. Cutting all dispositions for desirous grasping. The remaining root tendencies also do not arise, similar to a bodhisattva who have attained the state of non-arising of dharmas. Their mind is unmoved by desire. Yeah? For example, after nirvana, this is definitely the case with these desires and karmic impressions, that they are all rooted out and do not arise. On what basis they are born again? So, the point is, very simple point, is that you have become an Arhat. You have removed all your karmic impressions. This is what Huìyuǎn thinks. That is probably not totally true for Arhat. But he says, well, they don't have even any desire left. So why would they desire for Buddhahood? They cannot come to the world because they have left nothing in their mind stream, the fuel, karma, to be born again. So on and so on. There are so many different implications, right? And especially this scorched seed, they are like scorched seed, like once you burn a seed, then it is not going to germinate. So this metaphor appears time and again in many Mahāyāna sutras. Arhats are like scorched seed, no potential, finished, done. Yeah. So he says, it seems they will have no interest in world, about the people, and so on and so forth. So why should they even care about it, right? And there will be no reason to come back to the world. There will be no fuel to come back to the world, samsara, which normally is demanded for the bodhisattva practice. So it seems improbable that they would still have the potential to generate these two qualities, that is, great compassion and loving kindness. So the real thing he was looking at was he wanted some higher hermeneutics, because he was, of course, cognizant of the Sravaka texts, Abhidharmas and other things. And then at one point, I think he encountered Lotus Sutra, and it was actually introduced by Tumulosha himself, Kumārajīva himself, and then he was shocked. What? Like, this is something I have never heard. And it is about the three vehicle system versus one vehicle system. We have already talked about it. This is like Huìyuǎn Kuai. This is like a Tian Thai way of looking at the Lotus Sutra, but it's about, even though the Buddha taught three different vehicles, it's about returning to one eventually. Yeah? And it's also about Arhat versus Buddha. What are the differences between an Arhat and a Buddha? So now, why he was asking these questions, which is more or less apparent to us probably, but why a prominent person like him was asking this question, and we should look at his biography a little bit, short. He was a prominent Chinese monk of his time, actually, very famous. He was considered as the first patriarch of Pure Land Buddhism. He founded the Lotus Society, and he was a student of Tawan, who was actually compiling one of the earliest catalogs, like, because the texts were trickling into China, and then someone had to, note them down. Who wrote these texts? When were they translated, and so on and so forth. So he was one of the earliest, and this catalog was actually incorporated into another very famous one, but nevertheless, this was one of the important works. So he was a student, a prominent student of a person who used to compile the details about the text, who wrote it, what is the content, and so on and so forth, right? And he was the crème de la crème of early Chinese Buddhism, and the third generation Buddhist, actually. It's not like he just encountered Buddhism, but he was the third generation. And these are big names, actually. Fo Tu Chang, and he was from Kucha also, and his disciple Tao An, who is the master of Huìyuǎn. So why was even such an eminent and erudite monk, who after 5 decades of career in Buddhism asked questions to a foreigner, Kumārajīva? So this begs a kind of historical situation. So it is because the transmission of Buddhism in China is a very unique case, actually, not organized like Sri Lanka or Tibetan transmissions. For hundreds of years, individual monks carried texts of different genre, Actually, they used to carry one text and go to China and translate, and that text used to be the center of their focus, the center of their practice, right? So we had Abhidharma school, Vinaya school, and then the Madhyamaka school, the 3-text school, and so on and so forth. So at least 10 schools at one point, if we look at it from this point of view. So they were a bit confused, and then Chinese canon was open for a long time. Even late Tang Dynasty, I think texts were being included. So texts were coming in, and then of course they didn't have the system like we had, like one hard disk or something. So they encountered one after another, and this text had different flavor. In one text, it was the Arhat who was the ideal. In another, it was the Bodhisattva, right? In one text, Arhat Nirvana was the end. In another, that was just the beginning, right? So that was very difficult for them. So as a solution, they started to write catalogs, elaborate catalogs, and doxography. So they had a panjiao system. It's like literally saying it's dividing the teachings of different texts. Which one is definitive and which one is the provisional? Nitartha and Neyartha, Liao Yi and Bu Liao Yi. In India, we have at least we have a frame of 4 tenet systems, but they did not have it. They knew about it, but they didn't have it. So they had to read each text and then categorize them. That's what the teacher of Huìyuǎn was doing, Taoan was doing. His teachers were also doing the same. So generations were trying to understand, which text is the final and definitive text, what is the value of certain text, and so on and so forth. So in the midst of this confusion, he was asking these questions. And it's important, the value of this text is important because it's a non-canonical witness, right? It's a correspondence between two people. So very interesting thing, so that we can really look at this the Chinese situation unbiased, so-called. It's not that canonical would be biased, but I'm just trying to be more careful. So what were the main confusions and misunderstandings? First, the early Chinese Sangha were not fully cognizant of the subtle nuances of paths and vehicular systems within Buddhism. They didn't know about it. Second, many Mahāyāna sutras seem to say that the Arhat's path ends with the realization of an unconditioned. It's another way of saying nirvana in Chinese. And the third, it was in fact Kumārajīva himself who wrote the discussion of the Lotus Sutra to Huìyuǎn. So this was the context. I think I made it clear. Now, how did Kumārajīva reply to his queries? Well, what was his strategy? So, first of all, Kumārajīva did not write anything by himself. He had a group of people who were working for him. It is often said that he had even 1,000 people in his group, translation group, and then some were scripts, some were polishing the text, some were, some knew source text, some knew the target and the target text, target language, and so on and so forth. So it was a huge, how do you say? It's a collaborative work. So, but nevertheless, his legacy is that he left quality translations of many Buddhist texts, and then they were in vogue in China because his translation was really, really nice, and then trendy, you can say, for Chinese people. And then we know his thoughts indirectly through the correspondence with Lúshān Huìyuǎn, or prefaces or commentaries written by his students for many translated texts. So this is an occasion to understand Kumārajīva. When we read this text, this is a direct occasion to understand him, his thoughts, what he was, whether he was a Mahāyānist or Abhidharmic, so on. We know that he was a Mahāyānist, right? So his replies actually loosely follow the objections presented by Huìyuǎn, but they are scattered. Like sometimes we find certain answers in the first chapter, some in second, and sometimes in the 10th chapter. So it's a bit scattered, and we had to be careful. So instead of addressing his issue right away, because he could just write, okay, this is the meaning of the Lotus Sutra, but he doesn't do that because the issue is not so easy. And he had to analyze the path of the Shravakas, the path of the Mahāyāna, and also the difference between Arhat and the Buddha, and then so on and so forth. So I have categorized his replies on 4 broad topic. Yeah? The remainder, vasana, latent tendencies, and the path to Buddhahood, the great compassion and the great loving kindness, skill in means and wisdom, and then inconceivable nature of the Buddha. That is his trump card at the end, and you'll see how he uses it. But does he really solve the problem? Solve the curiosities of Lúshān Huìyuǎn? A discussion of the first 3 topics does not provide a direct answer to the main question, but at least it gives a kind of a background, right, about the 3 vehicles, their implications, and so on and so forth. And then how can an Arhat eventually achieve the Buddhahood has to be investigated further based on the evidences that Kumārajīva provides, which are not very direct. Conflicting claims and statements found in Buddhist texts such as the Wisdom Sutras, the Lotus Sutras, and so on and so forth. The reason I have mentioned Wisdom Sutras and Lotus Sutras is because he translated many of them, and we can expect to find his thoughts there, how he structured his replies to Huìyuǎn. That's just normal reconstruction, I think. The problem of residue or habitual tendencies. So Kumārajīva begins by introducing a fault in an Arhat's attainment to imply that Arhats are not fully enlightened. He says, it's an interesting topic which is not often talked in Buddhist studies, I think. Okay, this is what he says. So even though all Arhats have purified mind after achieving nirvana with reminder, they still cannot avoid loss of mindfulness. For what is done through body and speech. By contrast, ignorant people give rise to impure perceptions, observing an Arhat's body or verb loss of mindfulness. In fact, Arhats no longer have any other defiling factors. Yes, it's a bit enigmatic, but what he's saying is that it boils down to saying that Arhats are not fully perfected compared to the Buddha, and they still have rooms for perfection. And this actually, Arhats losing the mindfulness, is quite pervasive in Buddhist texts. Whether it's Theravada or Sarvāstivāda, of course in Mahāyāna, right? That there are many examples, like Sariputra. You might think the Sariputra was one of the prominent disciples of the Buddha, but he also had some character. He used to display that character. Nanda, Pilinda Vatsa, Modgalyayana, Gavampati, and so on and so forth. For example, this Gavampati, as the text sources reveal, that he was a cow for several lifetimes in his previous lives. And then when he was in front of the Buddha in his assembly, unconsciously he would move his mouth like this. And that was due to because of the loss of mind, because it's said that Arhats, they have to maintain their mindfulness. It is not natural and spontaneous like the one of the Buddha. So when the person is aware, yes, of course, he or she would stop it. But if they are not aware, and then they would do such kind of bodily acts, or it could be other things, or verbal acts. In the case of Pilindavatsa, he used to say one expletive, quite often. And that was because the text explained that was because of his habitual tendency of becoming a Brahmin for several lifetimes and scorning, the non-Brahmins, or, So there are interesting topic in these are interesting things in Buddhist texts. We often ignore or overlook, perhaps. So, and then this is the metaphor by Kumārajīva, how he describes this situation. This is like a person whose legs were chained for a long time and eventually freed after a long time. So you must have seen the effect of some animals being chained for a long time. Even if you remove the chain, the animals do not move, right? It's something like this. Though the feet remained impaired, not convenient, there is no external thing, or there is no other way to do it. That means they could not move freely because they were chained for a long time. They had this habitual tendency of being chained. They thought that they are so conditioned that they are chained, and then they react out of that conditioning. And this is something that he says Arhats have not removed. That means there is a room for perfection. So he's paving a ground to explain why even an Arhat can become a fully and completely enlightened Buddha. So it's a kind of a roundabout way of addressing the issue. There are two kinds of obscurations. We know that, right? The first is afflictions of the three realms. It's another way in Chinese. This is how it is here by Kumārajīva. The second is the bond of the bodhisattvas. So first is the klesa avarana, the obscurations of the klesa, the afflictions, and the second is the obscuration for the omniscience. So even though, let's assume that Arhats, they have removed the obscuration for the three realms because they are enlightened in the sense they have come out of the three realms, that is the samsara, but they are still bounded by this second obscuration. And then the second issue, Kumārajīva on the generation of compassion, perhaps based on his understanding of the implied meaning of the Lotus Sutra, he presents some conditions for an Arhat to generate compassion, which implies that Arhats are not totally like a scorched seed. This is what he says. So the loving kindness and compassion of an Arhat, although is inferior to the loving kindness and compassion of a Bodhisattva because of being together with pure mind, it is not an unmarvelous indeed. Just like Sutra says, monks practice the 7 factors of awakening, Sapta Bodhyanga, harmonize with loving kindness. They can actually, these are the people who can actually generate bodhicitta later on, the implication. So it means that the bodhyanga, the seven factors of enlightenment, it is practiced. Let's say if you talk about the 5-path system, it is practiced in the path of seeing. So at that time, if it is conjoined, those practices are conjoined with the practice of loving kindness and compassion, then that essence remains, even though one attains the arhathood. And that essence can be probably revived, and the person can go for the complete Buddhahood. That seems to be the implication. Nevertheless, at the time of generating the mind of Buddhahood, they require to strengthen the mind, which is called the mind of great loving compassion. Just like the Lotus Sutra explains that Arhat hears of this matter now in another place and subsequently generates the mind. This is an interesting point, and which is explained by another text translated by Kumārajīva, Tachatulun, which is the commentary on the 25,000 verses of perfection of wisdom. And then there it is said that another person is the pure abodes. So it looks like these Arhats will eventually go to the pure abodes, where they again generate the the bodhicitta, the mind of Bodhi, and then they start to walk on the path of Mahāyāna. So it looks like, as I have found, this statement based on a passage from the Satyasiddhi Sastra. It's a compiled Sastra. It's a treatise. And then Kumārajīva says, such an Arhat takes a longer period of time to purify his or her Buddha field and transform sentient beings. Yeah? So he says that is possible. That means, first of all, the person or the sentient being would first go for the Arhathood. Then again, the person will have to generate and walk on the path of Mahāyāna and then become the Buddha. So for him, it's a circuitous path. It's not a direct one. There could be an easier one, which is the Mahāyāna. And similar things about the skill in means. Yeah. What he says is that, those people in Great Mahāyāna say that there are two types of desires. The first one is the desire for the three realms, and second is the desire to get liberation from the three realms, which is the desire for the dharma of nirvana. Although Arhats cut through the desire of three realms, they try to get out of the samsara, but they do not cut the desire for dharma of nirvana. So it boils down to saying that Arhats, it's psychological thing in a way, what he's trying to say. Even though the Arhats, they want to detach themselves from these three realms, say, but nevertheless they are not detached with the idea of the ultimate nirvana. That means they don't want to think about other people. They are actually more fascinated by the idea that they will attain a kind of a nirvana, which is the Sravaka nirvana. So they lack the skill in means here means. It's often said that at the point, let's say in the Mahāyāna path, around at the end of the sixth bhumi, sixth level, someone who has mastered the prajna paramita, that is the perfection of wisdom, the person can actually cut off everything and then go towards the Arhat Nirvana. But skillfully, bodhisattvas often keep a little bit of affliction so that they can move on. They can move on to 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, and then accumulate the extra merit that is necessary to become a Buddha. This is one of the meaning of the skill in means, upaya kaushalya. So that is what he was saying actually. So, however, even if a bodhisattva first wishes to enter nirvana by means of the path of the Buddha, due to the lack of skill means and the wisdom, they fall to the ground of hearers and the solitary seekers. Actually, there are many descriptions of bodhisattvas falling from bodhisattva path to the Arhat path, because they lack that skill of keeping a little bit of balance, keeping a little bit of affliction, so that they can be born again in the samsara, they can come back and practice the merit. So you can look at the Perfection of Wisdom 8000, I think, Tasutulun, of course, and many other texts. Okay, so furthermore, as the Lotus Sutra says, the Arhats are predicted to become Buddha. The Sutra further speaks of the final body of the Arhat. Can we not believe that these two phrases both come from the mouth of the Buddha? So what he's saying is that, I told you earlier, sometimes Kumārajīva can use his trump card. Like, for example, it comes from the canonical text, so why don't you believe it? But some other times he also explains these things clearly. It is merely because the Arhat will not again receive the karma-bound appearance that we speak of the last birth. This is the point he wants to make. Like, it looks like there are two types of rebirth in Buddhism. Well, we can say even three types if we go to Vajrayana, let's say, but two types at least. One is karma bound rebirth. Another is, even if you have removed your karma, if you take some kind of vow, that can serve as a condition for you to come back to the world. So here what he's saying is that, well, even though Arhats have removed affliction, gross afflictions, and they have not removed the vasana, so they are not fully enlightened anyway, they can take extra vows, they can generate bodhicitta, and due to the force of that bodhicitta, they can be born again in the samsara and walk on the path of Mahāyāna and complete their merit, the accumulation of merit. So this is what he is actually implying here. I will not go to this dharma. Okay, the final statement of Kumārajīva on why and how an Arhat can become a Buddha. So he presents actually two reasons why Arhats cannot in a way he used the negative, like if they don't have this, they cannot go, they cannot reach the complete Buddhahood. The first is that the Lotus Sutra allows sentient beings who take pleasure in the lesser vehicles teachings to obtain liberation. The second is that which is bodhisattvas to directly proceed for the Buddhahood and not along roundabouts. Why is it so? An Arhat quickly realizes unconditioned. Sorry, I have to. So yes, here it is. Now later on, while entering the Bodhisattva path, not having a sharp faculty, they encounter difficulty in practicing the great path, and due to having relied on meager merit. So what he's saying is that there are two reasons why actually Arhats cannot become the fully enlightened Buddha. Number one, their faculty is not very sharp. No? And then we can understand that it's a common idea in the Buddhist text that according to your practices, according to your merit, your faculties could be sharper or weaker. Yeah? So we have 22 faculties if you look at the Abhidharma, and then the faculties of a Buddha, Pratyeka Buddha, and an Arhat, they differ greatly actually. Yeah? So, and there is a point where these faculties are determined. It's called samyaksaṃbuddha niyama. It's a point of certainty, like for example the type of practices you are doing, and then you develop certain kind of certain quality of the faculty. You can change it, yeah, within the limit of certain path system. That once you cross that point, then you are destined to become either a Pratyeka Buddha or a Buddha or an Arhat. Yeah, this is how Abhidharmas, especially, they explain. It's also in the Mahāyāna text actually. It's also mentioned in the Mahāyāna text. So what Kumārajīva is saying is that, well, first of all, Arhats are not fully enlightened compared to the Buddha. They have residues in their mind. They have the possibility to generate compassion later on too. They can do that in the pure abodes in front of the Buddha. Yeah? And then if they have a sharp faculty and they accumulate merit somehow, a vast amount of merit, and it's possible for them to become a fully enlightened Buddha, even though they are an Arhat. Yeah? Even though they have already attained an Arhathood. So some of the possible sources of Kumārajīva's thoughts, I will just quickly go through them because they are interesting. The logic is a cluster of texts that Kumārajīva either translated or might be familiar with. It seems to me that his replies on this particular topic are, for the most parts, based on either the Tācatulun, and I found most of his thoughts in Tācatulun. It's a commentary on Prajñāparamita, 25,000 verses, or the other perfection of wisdom sutras like 18,000 or the 8,000 and which one? And also in the Vimalakirti Sutra, as well as many other texts he translated. And I have also looked at the common scriptures that Huìyuǎn and Kumārajīva quote within this text, within the 18 chapters. And there are some exceptional texts that I have considered, because they will give you the idea of different types of arhats, and this will help us to understand the potential of different people, different arhats. So the first text I have considered actually is Maitripa's collection of texts on non-conceptual realization, even though it is composed very late, but it gives, it offers three types of, let's say, three different types of arhats or sravakas: weak, middling, and superior. And probably we can relate with the idea of sharper faculty or weaker faculty that Kumārajīva was explaining. So he says there are inferior sravakas, and then they are a bit, they are a bit dull, actually not extremely stupid, they are a bit dull. They have weaker faculty, and they believe in a person, Pudgala, that is neither permanent nor impermanent, and they rely on the repulsiveness in order to attain arhathood. So they don't even rely on things like no self or suffering. They actually, suffering, yes, probably. So they rely mostly on the practice of repulsiveness in order to attain arhathood, because they just need some kind of detachment, some sense of detachment from the things they perceive. So weak have fixed potential, niyata gotra, that means they can attain only sravaka bodhi, and lack compassion towards sentient beings. That's how he explains these weaker types of Sravakas. The middling Sravakas have some degree of consideration for others, that means they have some compassion, a little bit. Meditate on the inhaling and exhaling of breath, anapana smriti, with the view of a person free from permanence or impermanence. You can see that their practices are a little bit slightly deeper, and also they have some degree of refined wisdom, and also they have some compassion. The third type is the superior one. Superior Sravakas' comprehension of the Four Noble Truths is thorough, and their meditation is the view of emptiness in regards to the body. Their compassion for sentient beings is superior to others. So, Sravakas also have compassion. It's not like they don't have compassion, right? So it's like, look at the general situation. We have lost so many texts in India. It's often said that only 25% of what was in India was actually translated, reached Tibet. Yeah? And then around 4th century, Vasubandhu laments. He says he was considered as the second Buddha, and he wrote one of the most comprehensive text, Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya, Abhidharma text. He was actually saying around the 4th century that we have lost so much of our Buddha Vacana already. So here we have some evidence of different types of Sravakas having different potentials, and then we can relate that with what Kumārajīva was saying in terms of their weaker or sharper faculties, in terms of their potential, let's say, in regards to the compassion, whether they can generate or not. And then, but at the end of this analysis, this part of the text, Amansikar provides both Triyana and Ekayana point of view in regards to these Sravakas, and seems to uphold the latter as an. So author, who is Gyanasri Mitra, he says, he quotes Nagarjuna saying that everyone will eventually attain Buddhahood. Anyway, he goes for the stronger form of Bodhisattva universalism. But nevertheless, there are different views on this topic. Another is a commentary by Vasubandhu on the Lotus Sutra. So this is lost in Sanskrit. We have only, it is attributed to Vasubandhu, and we have, I think we have only extant in Chinese. So here, he says that there are 4 types of Sravakas. First is the fixed Gotra Sravaka. Second is the Sravaka who has spiritual superiority, conceited. Third is the Sravaka who retrogressed from the mind of Bodhi. Remember this. There are people, there are Sravakas like Sariputra, Ananda, and Mahamoggalayana and Mahakashyapa, who were actually fallen bodhisattvas according to certain texts, Mahāyāna texts. So fourth is the manifested Sravakas. It's like Nirmita Sravakas. The example could be like some of the tulkus we have, right? The mind stream will project several forms, and then they are actually projected bodies, but not really the bodies we have. So what does this mean? It also means that the first one is the fixed Sravaka. That means the person that Sravaka can become only Sravaka Bodhi, can attain only Sravaka Bodhi, not others. Third one is a Sravaka who actually had generated mind of Bodhi in his previous life, but now is in the path of the hearer's vehicle. Yeah? So these people can actually easily go towards, the implication is that these people can easily go towards the path of Mahāyāna. Okay, now this is an interesting reference, the perfection of wisdom in 18,000 lines. So Maitreya, who is the future Buddha, he asked, so then all the disciples have an absolute assurance of their establishment in Nirvana. That means do all the Sravakas, hearers, they will become Buddha. And the Buddha says, no, they have not. And why? Because this world has beings of various dispositions, of manifold dispositions. And among sentient beings with these various dispositions, one can apprehend a variety of patterns with regard to their lineage. Some beings belong to lineage in which from the beginning they strive for an exalted goal, and they also reach that exalted goal, that is Mahāyāna. Others, they strive for a low goal, that is Sravaka path probably, and they remain there, stuck there. Others, they actually start from the lower one, and they reach the low goal, but then they are not contented with it. They are not happy with it. Then they will go eventually for the complete and full enlightenment. Yeah? So this is an excellent reference, I think. If a person who belongs to the third kind of lineage, that is, he goes for a low, reaches there, and then again he moves for the higher, on having attained Arhatship, wants thereafter to eagerly strive after the supreme enlightenment, how can he possibly attain that without ever being reborn again? And I do not proclaim for him the kind of rebirth which is the effect of karmic defilements. So the third type, the third type of Sravaka, which go for the lower goal, attains the lower goal, that means the Sravaka Bodhi, but decides to go for Buddhahood. Now, even though they don't have any karmic residues, the afflicted karmic residues, let's say, they can generate the mind of Bodhi and be reborn in the world. That would be the cause. That's what Buddha here clearly mentions. Now, 8,000 is bit. What I was talking about this, the samyakatva niyama. It is called samyakatva niyama, means at one point your lineage is decided while you are walking on a path, let's say Sravaka path or any path, at one point your faculties are decided because of the accumulation of merit and the practices you had. Now, even if you have, here in the reference is that, even if that person has entered into samyakattu niyama, that means the status of certitude, perfection, that means the person would definitely have a trajectory towards the Sravaka Bodhi or Pratyeka Bodhi or samyaksaṃbuddha. Even if that is already decided, faculties are decided, nevertheless, if that person wants to change the vocation, that is possible. Yeah, that is from the 8,000 verses. Yeah. This is actually a translation from the Chinese by my own teacher. This is the definition of samyakattu niyama. Yeah. So, okay. This is not very important. Now, Tasu Tulun, this is one of the seminal texts for Chinese Buddhism. It was translated by Kumārajīva. Some even say that it was written by Kumārajīva himself, but now attributed to Acharya Nagarjuna. So this, I have summarized the whatever this text explains about this topic. So those sentient beings that are afraid of samsara, are indolent and not firm about aiming for Buddhahood, should be able to save themselves via Sravaka Bodhi. Yeah? So I would not doubt the familiarity of Huìyuǎn and Kumārajīva in regards to this text, because Kumārajīva actually translated it and he even added some of his annotations, and Huìyuǎn was studying this text for a long time actually. And Arhats who exhaust their karmic afflictions do not attain rebirth within 3 realms, but do gain rebirth outside it in the pure abodes and complete the path towards Buddhahood. Clearly mentions this. However, those who take the path by Arhatut towards Buddhahood take longer to achieve it due to not saving sentient beings. That means not accumulating enough merit, not having the profound samadhis like Bodhisattva, and not having sharp faculties. Once again, the issue of faculty emerges here. It is only the Buddha who can comprehend if any of the Arhats can go towards Buddhahood via Arhat path. This is the inconceivable nature of a Buddha and his teachings. And this is evoked by Kumārajīva also. He says that it's an inconceivable nature of the Buddha. We cannot understand everything. We cannot fathom everything what he has done in his lifetime. And this is actually mentioned by the Buddha himself. As far as I remember, the text is the Achintita Sutta in the Pali text. Buddha says, "O monks, don't think about 4 things. Don't reflect too much. You'll go crazy." Actually, he uses this kind of word. He says, you will lose your mind. And one of them is about the qualities of a Buddha. Never think too much about it, because you will never fathom. You will never fully understand. So here he uses that final trump card there, like, since the Buddha is saying so, yeah, we just have to believe it. But it's not the case that Kumārajīva is using this card. Actually, throughout the Buddhist history, many masters, Nagarjuna has used it, Santideva has used it, and then many masters in the past have used it, because that is, in general, that is the understanding in the Buddhist tradition, that he is the source, yeah, and then we just have to, all the Buddhist hermeneutics actually is about understanding the intention of the Buddha. Yeah? So he is the final goal. And those Arhat who do not hear the Lotus, and this is the special thing, and then both Lotus Sutra and this Tatsutulun mention, that those Arhats who do not hear the Lotus Sutra will enter into extinction. That means they will go for the Sravaka Bodhi, the normal Arhathood. If they hear about it and then they have this some kind of conceptual frame of the complete Buddhahood, and then if they have sharp faculties and they choose to walk on that path, they will eventually do it. And that would not impede them to, they cannot have a normal rebirth out of karma, but they can have a kind of a special rebirth which comes from taking vows. And then that will help them to go towards perfect enlightenment. I think I have many references, but I think more or less I have made my point. Okay, maybe this will be the last reference. Yeah, Kumārajīva was well versed in the Sarvāstivāda Abhidharma, and then Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya, written by Vasubandhu, summarizes the main points of Sarvāstivāda Abhidharma actually. So, but the Vaivāshika point, and then of course the Sautrantika point too. So, in this text, Vasubandhu says that there are three differences, actually four differences between a Buddha and an Arhat. So, an Arhat will not fully understand the dharmas of the Buddha, that means the avenika dharma, the unshared dharmas of the Buddha, because they have no idea about it. That is number one. They have a limited understanding of time and space, and then they will not understand the infinite cause and conditions that can give rise to certain things, like for example the eye of the peacock feather. Yeah? What are the cause and conditions that would create the eyes of the peacock's feather? The Buddha, because of his omniscience, because he has removed all kinds of afflictions and latent tendencies, he has obtained the omniscience, and that is the reason why Buddha knows the infinite cause and conditions of anything. Yeah? So in four areas, Arhats lack the ability. Yeah? Number one, they have limited understanding of time, limited understanding of space. Third is, they do not understand completely the qualities of the Buddha, especially the 18 unshared dharmas. That is what the Yashomitra explains in his sub-commentary to this text. Yeah? And they don't have omniscience in general. So that means, but the point that I was trying to make, and then I think Kumārajīva too, is that since there is such a big room for Arhats to perfect themselves, and then if they generate bodhi, if they have that kind of ruchi, that means inclination, if their psychological makeup is for complete and full enlightenment, they can still do it. Yeah? But that is, it is not natural for them to go towards the complete Buddhahood, not for all of them, because there are different types of Sravakas with different potentials, maybe different faculties. Yeah? Okay, thank you. And now I think
So thank you very much for this discussion. So now we have about 15-20 minutes for questions and answers. So please, if you have some questions or comments, please lift your hand. This is also true for those online, those 21 people who are online. You have an electronic hand and we can see it. So please feel free. Yes, Nishan?
Like, what is the exact ontological place where Arhat goes so they can again generate bodhicitta? Like, what creates the cause for them to, like you said, the pure abode? Like, the concept is like similar to the pure lens and stuff. What is the reason, what cause have they accumulated in order to go there? Like, if their karma is already eradicated, then like you said, it was like a born seed. So what makes them go to that pure abode or something ontological so that they can come back again?
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned, that's the reason why I mentioned about two forms of Bodhisattva universalism. Those texts, those Mahāyāna texts, which advocate the weaker forms of Bodhisattva universalism, they are the one who say that once they exhaust all the karmic residues, then they will not be born again. Yeah? It is their claim. But I think those texts, such as the Lotus Sutra and the Tatsatulun, yeah, and those which advocate the stronger forms of Bodhisattva universalism, it looks like they say that these Arhats are actually born in the pure abodes, means pure lands. That's how I understand. It's also, I understand this also from from one commentary by Haribhadra. What he says is that these, as far as I remember, these Arhats are born within lotuses. And then at one point, when the time is ripe, Buddhas come, and then they project some kind of rays of light towards them. It's a really sci-fi, scientific. And then they will wake up, and then the Buddhas would say, they caress the hair, and then they say, okay, it's time for you to go towards the Buddhahood. Yeah? So I suppose these pure abodes mentioned here is actually pure land. That's how I understand. But since texts are many, claiming many things, yeah, it's very difficult to say. Just like I would just quote Acharya Nagarjuna in one of his hymns. He says, I don't understand you, O Buddha. You are so enigmatic. Sometimes you teach self, sometimes you teach no self, sometimes you teach Sravakapad, sometimes you teach only making merit, sometimes you teach emptiness. Yeah? So I don't understand you. So I would again use the trump card that was used by Kumārajīva, that Buddhas are really inconceivable, and things written in Buddhist texts, if you continue to look ontological status of these things, good luck to you. I cannot completely, fully reply to your question. Since I don't have omniscience, I don't have Dibya Chakshu, the divine eyes, so the only thing I can say is something written in these texts. Yeah?
I'm curious to hear your thoughts about what if you asked an actual Theravada Arahant today, what would he say? And I'm always like with Mahayana, I'm like, why would the Pali canon not have all these things? Like, how is it? Why would the Buddha teach like the Pali canon instead of like just teaching the full teaching in the beginning? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And like secret disciples in the forest, he would teach in secret. That also doesn't make any sense to me. Like, yeah, it just seems weird why the Buddha wouldn't just like make it much more simple and say, not even teach the Arahant path in the beginning then. Just like Buddhahood, easy. And even Pure Land, oh, you go to Pure Land, you become a Buddha easily, no problem. Like, it just seems a little bit silly sometimes.
Thank you for your question. But now the problem is that what is the reason we consider Pali text as the yardstick for all other texts? Since we know that the manuscripts of Pali texts are not beyond 5th century AD. What we know about the Pali texts are from the Sri Lankan chronicles, which were actually written around 3rd to 4th century. The Dipavamsa, Mahavamsa, and Nikaya Samgraha. Actually, Nikaya Samgraha was even written on the 14th century, and these are the texts Sri Lankan Theravadins used throughout the ages to reconstruct their own lineage. And these texts are written from 800 to more than 1,000 years after the parinirvana of the Buddha. So the whole historiography that you are taught in the modern scholarship, perhaps we need to revise that first before we go to the Mahāyāna, the problem of Mahāyāna. Since we haven't fully established that Pali texts are the earliest, and there are conjectures and theories, we cannot deal with this question fully. Yeah? Especially when we have such tenuous and sectarian information about Buddhist history. Now, and I was talking about it with some of the leading scholars, and I often discuss with them. Like, for example, I have talked to Jannat here and Mattia Salvini and many other people who are actually in this field. And then Jannat here was, I think, as far as I remember, it was around 2018. I had this conversation with Jannat here. She said that, Professor said that we have safely abandoned this idea of finding the origin of certain schools, yeah? Because that is not possible. Now we look at only transmissions. The reason is, I can give you one very simple reason. One reason is that we have nothing whatsoever before King Ashoka. King Ashoka is at least 250 to 300 years after the parinirvana of the Buddha. Theravada text itself says that their texts were written around 83 BCE in Sri Lanka during the time of the king Vattagamini. Yeah? That means it's like 400 years after the parinirvana of the Buddha. The reason we are repeating this thing again and again, because we are conditioned to think like that. It's the colonial vestige, the scholarship that was left by the colonialists and the early scholars, and then I don't blame them, I never blame them, because that's what they saw. They looked at the Pali tradition, and then the methodology was not very evolved. The tool they thought was the magical tool, that's philology. They thought that through positivistic philological reconstruction, they can actually find the layers of Buddhist text in India, just like they have done with the biblical studies or other classical studies in the West. They were misguided because texts were retained by different people of different traditions in India, not only Buddhist texts. Yeah. And then that brings us to a new form of textual studies, new tradition, it has its own flavor. You cannot compare with the biblical studies or other things. Yeah? So I think it is time for the religious studies in general to look at Buddhism in a new light. We need new methodologies to look at Buddhism because it is not compatible with biblical studies. It is not compatible with any other classical studies. And it's not the problem with Buddhism, it's the problem with methodology. Our methodologies are too weak, too outdated, and too irrelevant for Buddhism. I'm not saying it is not useful. Yeah, we need methodology, good reflections always, to reconstruct something. So anyway, in general, our Buddhist historiography is faulty, incomplete. It is full of conjectures and theories that we conflict with the reality. And your question reflects that.
But at least I'm like, the Pali canon must have been like orally transmitted, because otherwise it would not have been the way it is with so many repetitions. So, like,
Yes. So
it would make sense that it
yes.
comes from.
So does the Mahāsangika, so does the Sarvāstivāda, so does the Mahāyāna, so does the Vajrayana. So if you look at the sectarian claims exclusively, that's called the source bias, and we do not look at the entire transmissions that we have, varieties of transmissions, and reconstruct the Buddhist history from the ground, then we will have these kind of problems.
I feel like adding something here,
Yes.
if you let me. Yeah, even all the Mahayana thoughts, if you're looking at early texts, or if you don't want to talk Pali Canon, most of the Mahayana ideas are already there. Like, for example, Buddha nature in the Third Noble Truth. It's obvious, right? Having the Third Noble Truth is meaning there is a way to attain Buddhahood. So basically, it's implied already Buddha nature in the first teachings. And we can find that all around the Pali Canon, isn't it? So there is a certain interpretation of the Pali Canon that is coming through, but that's not the all in all. So totally agree with what you were saying, Bibek.
Yes, we have a very, even we know very well in the modern Buddhist studies, we know very well that we are very selective. Even when we look at the Pali Canon, we look at only certain examples, certain texts, but we completely ignore others because we have filters. And that filters come from a long conditioning, a long scholarship, you can say, which is the legacy of the colonial period. As I said earlier, I don't find any problem with that kind of studies because we, in the academia, we believe that we will refine them. If there are, there is a self-filtering process. That's not a problem. And then since they were pioneers, they were early scholars, they did not have any other means to study in different ways. Their methodology were rudimentary, their understanding was rudimentary, they were only looking at one text or certain tradition, through certain lenses. Now we have more, you can say we have more resources, more data. This is also a problem of data, actually. You can analyze something to the extent that you generate, right? Data was so limited. I mean, you just looked at certain text and then you assumed that that's the truth. So, but actually, if we have, now we have more data from, and not only from the text, but also from other semiotics. That means like not only text, but also other cultural aspects, and then, iconography, or so on and so forth. And then we need to look at them from a broader perspective. So I think we are revising it. If you look at the text written recently, textbooks written, you will find almost everything being revised. You'll find all these ideas being revised. Actually, I find very little Theravada scholars who would claim that Pali is was the language spoken by the Buddha. We know that that's not true now, no more. We have abandoned the idea of early Buddhism because there was no such thing as early Buddhism. We don't have evidence. How do you prove it? Philology is such a tricky thing. You can actually introduce your bias very easily through philology. Yeah. It's mostly conjectural. And since, especially in the Indian context where texts were traveling and being transposed to another languages. So we don't know the language Buddha used to speak, to teach, and those texts were traveling around India, all over, and being translated into different regional languages. Also because of the injunctions by the Buddha himself. He said, well, the only prohibition we get from the Vinaya text is that do not write anything, do not write my words in Chandaso, that is the Vedic Sanskrit. Otherwise, you can actually record my teachings in any of your dialects, any of your languages. This is his injunction. That is the reason why Buddhism spread. Because text could be easily translated. There was no, let's say, no sense of that classical language, So, and then how through your philology, you are going to find all those traces. How is it possible that a tradition which was kept orally for 400 years and then written down and then transposed to several different languages, you expect to really understand everything, reconstructing through philology? That was an idea long time back. That's not possible. And that's the reason why there's a question.
I wanted to ask, I think Kumārajīva is often considered a Madhyamaka Buddhist, but I don't suppose Lúshān Huìyuǎn was Madhyamaka. I don't, Dāan wasn't. So would he have thought of this as consulting somebody in a different school, or just because of Kumārajīva's status, the fact that he was a Madhyamaka was irrelevant, just, he was the guy that you would ask these kind of questions to?
That is quite natural, I think. Even in the Tibetan tradition, we have this idea that time and again, our Rinpoches, they consider India as the source, and which is, and then something from India is always very sacred, and it is written in the land that comes from the land of the Aryas. So I think the same kind of idea was there during the time of Kumārajīva and Huìyuǎn. So anyone who would come from India would be cherished, right? That's a great thing. And then Kumārajīva had a great repute, actually. He was well known. He was protected by some, how do you say that, lords, and then he had a great reputation already. So they thought that if they could solve their problems with Kumārajīva, an authoritative person that comes from, let's say, from the cultural sphere of India, then I think that there was a kind of a fascination for that.
So there is a question online.
Yeah, I saw.
Yeah, you want to answer to this?
Let's see what is it. But more than, But continuing with the question asked just now regarding Pali Buddhism and Mahāyāna Buddhism, and which one is earlier, we cannot neglect the fact that in Mahāyāna Buddhist Sutta there is a visible competition going on with Arhats, Shravakas, and so on, and the Bodhisattvas. Can we see the same competition in early Buddhist Suttas? Well, that competition, I have often said that we also are conditioned to think that text should be in certain way. It should be written in certain way, and and we would consider that as the words of the Buddha. But that is an editorial decision, how text should be composed. For Buddhists, actually, Buddha Vachano, the words of the Buddha, is not like the words of the Jesus or more words of the Muhammad. This is the point we have to understand. For them, let's say, I often quote in the class, and I had quoted last time, both in Shravaka text and Mahāyāna text, it's written that Yat kinchit subhasitam sarvatat buddha bhasitam. They used to say that whatever is well spoken, that is actually spoken by the Buddha. That was the criteria for the Buddha Vachana. Yeah? We think that that word should come actually from the mouth of the Buddha. But the Buddha said, Yat kinchit subhasitam sarvatat buddha bhasitam. So you see, like the frame of our mind is so not Buddhist. It comes from so not Buddhist background that we fail to understand the nature of Buddhism. This is a methodological problem, actually. Yeah? So the object of your study, there should be an alignment between your methodology and the object of your study. Now, what Modin is saying is that the editorial decision could be changed in Buddhism. That's not a problem. Like if you look at the editorial decision of Pali texts, they are so polished compared to even the Chinese texts, actually. What does that mean? Once the texts are polished, do you think that Buddha would speak in that way? Yeah? There are repetitions there, yeah, which are clearly for memorization of that text, and then later on it is shortened. Yeah? All texts have the mark of editorial decision, actually. So the fact that Mahāyāna texts are more crude and they display certain non-21st century sensibilities shows that they are authentic. It is our sensibilities. We want text to be in certain way, and we want to consider that text as the Buddha Vachana. That's our limitations in my mind. That is not the problem with the earliest or early compilers who thought that you can compile, you can combine different texts. That's still Buddha Vachana. So the quality of being the Buddha Vachana, the words of the Buddha, was that it should remove the afflictions. It should help us to have positive mind frame. It should have the contemplation of the nature of reality, and it should show the reality of the dharmas, the phenomenon, the solakshana and samanya lakshana, that means the common traits and the special traits of these things, and so on and so forth. The criteria is completely different. How are you going to judge this text from the modern criteria that we have, that we look at Bible or any other literary text or any other thing? So we have to rethink for Buddhism. It's special. Yeah. That's what I will say. That there's there's another question. Should I reply? Okay. On a fundamental level, what are aspects we can learn and practice from an Arhat, given he is supposedly devoid of a lack of love? In terms of, let's say, I cannot even think of an analogy, the difference between an ordinary being and Arhat. It is such a big difference. Arhats are purified beings, praised by the Buddha. Actually, there are some texts which explain why Buddha was keeping monks and nuns in front, actually the monks in front, because they are purer, and he wanted to show to the world that these are the models, and you have to emulate these models. Yeah? Actually, it's mentioned in several different texts. So actually, Arhat, it's not a problem for Buddhism to choose one of the vocations. That is not a problem. It is just that Mahāyāna texts exalt the path of Mahāyāna, but it never says, actually, especially the texts that advocate the weaker forms of Mahāyāna Bodhisattva universalism, that you should not go for Arhathood. Yeah? Some texts do, but in general, the idea is that Buddha was so compassionate that he gave those teachings for them to help. Yeah? And that is a part of his upaya kausalya. So we have a lot to learn from Arhats. In terms of purity, in terms of discipline, in terms of wisdom, and so on and so forth. And we have noticed that some, I was mentioning the work by Gyanasri Mitra, the Maitripa's Amanasikara, where he mentions that there are Arhats who have compassion, Sravakas who have compassion. So there's a big gulf between us and an Arhat. So we have a lot of things to study. It's just that whether or not we choose to become an Arhat, that's our choice. That is just simply our choice. That's all I can say.
So we're coming to the end of this session.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. So now we just have to make a choice which path we want to go on. So please stay tuned. Bibek teaches here. He teaches Chinese texts, Buddhist texts. He also teaches methodology and other things. So if you're interested in his work, you should check him out.